Good day. I'm Daniela Ellerbeck, Legal Advisor to Freedom of Religion South Africa, commonly known as 4SA. Joining me today is 4SA's other legal advisor, Ms. Liesl Pretorius. Liesl, welcome.
Thank you, Daniela. Good to chat to you.
So today we are going to be talking about the importance of school governing bodies. Now, Liesl, let's first talk about what school governing bodies, commonly known as SGBs, are. What is an SGB and what does it actually do?
Well, Daniela, each public school in South Africa has or should have an SGB, and the SGB functions as the school's legal entity. It is responsible for governing the school. So it basically is a decentralized and collaborative decision-making structure which exemplifies grassroots democracy in action, which is also in line with the values of the Constitution. Each SGB is responsible for a number of things, such as determining a school's vision and mission, its policies relating to admissions, language, and religion, its code of conduct, its disciplinary code, its dress code, school hours, appointment of staff and teachers, and other functions such as overseeing school finance, the tuition quality and fees, sports culture, the buildings, other facilities, the hostel, if the school has one, school safety, and marketing.
Wow, that is a host of very important functions. As we can see, it's not just administrative functions. This really goes to like the heart of school matters. So it's fascinating that you say that you said exactly what an SGB does and that it's a decentralized form of power. Because actually, as I'm understanding what you're saying, is it's the government saying that the Department of Basic Education doesn't own the school. It's the community who owns the school. It's a community asset. And as such, the parents and other stakeholders in that community, such as the teachers or learners at that school, take ownership of the school and decide for themselves, okay, these are the rules, this is what's acceptable, this is the type of school we want. So an SGB governs the school, but what does the membership of an SGB look like, and who serves on the SGB and for how long? So we've mentioned learners, we've mentioned teachers, we've mentioned parents at the school.
Yes, well, as you also said now, Daniela, the SGB has so many functions because in a public school, it really belongs to the community, and that should be reflected in the membership of an SGB. So first of all, we have the school principal ex officio, who has to be there, and also electorate representatives. These are parents, educators, other staff members, even learners. And the South African Schools Act of 1996 requires that parents hold the majority membership of the SGB, which means that parents collectively have the final say in various key aspects of the governance of the school that their child attends. And SGBs are elected every 3 years when the Minister of Basic Education announces by publication of a notice in the Government Gazette that there will be SGB elections. The previous elections were in March 2021, and the next round of elections are expected to be in early 2024.
Wow, this is really fascinating stuff, because basically what you're saying is that parents themselves actually have a big say in what the school that their children attend looks like
Yes,
the rules
absolutely.
it has in place, its ethos, who it hires, how it teaches, what needs to be taught in terms of the curriculum. And I mean, if I'm correct, even in terms of the books that the school buys for teaching the curriculum, the SGB has a say over, because if I'm correct, the minister can set content, can set outcomes, but not content. And SGBs get a say in the content.
Well, for example, when it comes to life orientation and life skills, the school just needs to meet the CAP requirements. They can choose which content to use. So in that aspect, an SGB has a very important part to play, and parents through the SGB ensure that the learning materials that their children are exposed to are in line with the kind and quality of basic education that parents desire for their child.
Exactly. So it just shows you how important parents running in the school governing body elections, with the next ones happening early 2024, actually are. It's not just 3 years of deciding administrative functions, but it's 3 years of getting to be involved in the core business and values of the school that you send your kids to every day. And a lot of things that parents find to oppose their parental rights can often be linked back to school governing bodies and the fact that these parents aren't represented on the school governing bodies. So with that being said, what is all the fuss about? Why are school governing bodies so important? A bit of a, maybe give us a bit more context, because we seem to have hit some of the highlights already.
Well, the school governing body, in a nutshell, represents the institutional authority of parents in the public school system, specifically in respect of the particular school that their child attends. Now, it's important to backtrack and give a little bit of history here. After 1994, when South Africa became a democracy, the decision was taken to move away from apartheid's state school system, which was characterized by centralization in the national government and state control of basic education. So in our democratic school system, public school system, the schools now belong to the immediate community and should be run with minimal state intervention. And that's why parents, for example, have such a big say. And the school governing body basically sets the tone for the school in various key aspects that will determine for the next 3 years what kind of school your child will attend. This new cooperative governance model in basic education basically consists of a 3-tier system. Obviously, also the national and provincial governments are involved. But the approach emphasizes that your SGB is the best place to understand the nuances and the needs, and then also to serve the needs of its own school community. And giving so much power to the SGB and requiring that the SGB consists of a majority of parents acknowledges and recognizes the inherent rights of parents in basic education. And it also helps to stop any state interference should that arise.
I mean, this is such important content that you're sharing with us today, because I think many of us still think of our public schools as being state schools, when actually they're not. The state has said, look, we'll do the minimum that's required. We'll give you a building, we'll, send money your way, and we'll tell you what the outcomes of the curriculum are. So, for example, that your kids need to be able to read at this level and do maths at this level by this age. But everything else is over to you as parents. And I mean, that is truly groundbreaking, really amazing stuff. Again, just highlighting for me the crucial role that parents play in their schools. And I would actually argue responsibility, because if you're sending your child to a school, then if you are in a position to run for school governing body, you should, because you get to set the values, you get to set the ethos, you get to set what type of school it is that you send your kid to. And if you then have things taking place in that school that are contrary to, for example, your religious beliefs as a parent, or the values you want to teach your child, you're in a position to actually change that.
Absolutely. Yeah, Daniela. I mean, the question for me is, the question is not, should I be involved? It's like, can you afford not to be involved? It is a great responsibility, because parental rights are such important rights, but with every right comes a responsibility. And obviously there's state involvement, there's a need for checks and balances, but the state is involved minimally. So there's a gap left for the parents that they should and must fill responsibly.
Exactly. That is definitely what I'm getting out of what you're sharing with us today. So, Liesl, you mentioned that school governing bodies represent the institutional authority of parents in the public school system, which is quite a mouthful of a phrase. Now, what is this institutional authority of parents, and where does it come from?
Well, the institutional authority of parents, it's an authority that it links back to their parental rights, which they enjoy by the simple virtue that they're parents. But in line with international law, South African law recognizes that parents bear the primary responsibility for the education of their child, not the state. Parents do. For example, Education White Paper 1, which is one of the policy documents that informs the public education sector. It is said that
this is the Department of Basic Education's own policy document, right?
Yes.
So in terms of the department's own policy document, this is what they say.
Yes, absolutely. They recognize this in their own policy document, and any basic education sector legislation, laws, need to be aligned to these policy documents, because policy documents are also go through a public participation process. It reflects, what the people of South Africa wants. But Education White Paper 1 says that parents or guardians have the primary responsibilities for the education of their children. And this includes the right to be consulted by state authorities with respect to the form of that education. And it also includes that parents should be able to take part in the governance. The Education White Paper recognizes that this is an inalienable right that parents have to choose the form of education best for their children, and specifically mentions that this right includes the choice of language, cultural, and religious basis of the child's education. So that is just such an important recognition and emphasis of the rights and responsibilities of parents and the importance to fulfill that role in the basic education sector. And as I said, the South African Schools Act is aligned to this white paper. There are other white papers as well. But what the Schools Act does and the white paper, what it all does cumulatively, it enables parents to exercise their rights and their functions and their obligation concerning the education of their children and through the governance of the schools that their children attend.
I mean, this is, again, it's so different from our concept of state schools, that, you know, we send our kid to school and it's the state is responsible for all of this. It's so different that we actually get the freedom to be involved and take responsibility for this. So why is it so important that the institutional authority of parents is represented and protected in the public school system?
Well, as I said, the school governing body is the vehicle for this representation. And if their institutional authority is not represented, they will not be able to exercise their rights and responsibilities to ensure that their child receives the kind and quality of basic education that they desire for their child. And parents have the right to do this. So it's very important that this right is protected and that the state involvement is to support this right and to enable this right. Education White Paper 2, which is another important policy document in the basic education sector, recognizes parents' decision-making powers in relation to their education and the governance of the school that they attend. So what is important to realize is that the role and functions and powers of school governing bodies, should these be curtailed, parental rights are undermined. And this contravenes not only numerous international law obligations that South Africa has undertaken to honor, various international treaties, such as, for example, the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, also known as the Banjul Charter, the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. There are various others. So this is against our international law obligations, but it also undermines democracy, because the state would be overstepping into parents' sphere of authority, but parents have the responsibility to take up their authority in order to ensure that the best interests of the child are protected.
No, I mean, exactly. This is, I think, often where parents find themselves at loggerheads with the state, when they feel like the state's overstepping their authority, when they realize, like, oh my gosh, this is happening in school and this is contrary to what I want my child to learn, or it's contrary to the environment I want to find my child in. I want my child to find themselves in when they attend school. But it's, again, as you were saying, parents not taking up necessarily the freedom and the responsibility they've been given to actually exercise that authority in that school realm.
Exactly. And that's why it's important, when there's any potential threat to parental authority, whether it's intentional or not, to speak up and oppose this, and to work with government to show that, no, but this is overstepping into our area of responsibility. For example, the BELA Bill, Basic Education Laws Amendment Bill, it's currently before Parliament. It's busy with provincial consultations. There are certain things there that might undermine the authority of school governing bodies, and then per extension the right of parents. So it's important to highlight this to Parliament, to highlight this to the government, to ensure that everybody fulfills their mandated role towards children in the basic education sector.
No, completely, because essentially what's happening is that there's a proposed change to the law to take away authority from school governing bodies, so to take away freedom and responsibility from the parents, essentially, and say, actually, the state's going to control more of the school you send your child to, and you're going to control less. So yes. How can parents become involved in school governing bodies?
Well, as I said, school governing bodies are elected every 3 years. The previous round of elections was in 2021. The next round of elections are expected early 2024. So you can become involved by standing for election so that you will serve on the school governing body that your child attends, or voting in the school governing body elections, so that even if you do not stand yourself, you can vote for a person that you know will fulfill that responsibility on the school governing body.
So parents, listen up. That means elections for you on next year, early next year in 2024. So Liesl, what is at stake if parents don't get involved in the SGB? I mean, we've already highlighted some, but perhaps do a deep dive for us here.
When parents are not involved in the governance of the school that their child attends, they risk losing control over the kind and the quality of the basic education that they desire for their child. This is despite it being the inalienable right to choose that education, but they must exercise it. They need to take active steps to exercise that right in the best interest of their children. So parents cannot afford to be passive. And as I said, undermining parental rights, it erodes democracy. So there's that. And some major organizations that, for example, represent school governing body interests and rights, even at the national level, have said that they are concerned that there seems to be more and more state interference, and that parents simply cannot afford not to vote. So that's what is at risk. And it's important to keep school governing bodies active and healthy, and to protect their rights, because it's then wait and then something happens and the rights are eroded, and now you sit in a very difficult situation where you kind of have to backtrack and fight to regain your rights that you have, your inalienable right that you have to ensure that your child gets the kind of education that you desire for your child.
Yeah, it's almost like a situation of what you don't use, you lose.
Exactly.
And then we end up back in a situation of almost like a, state school, even
exactly.
though that should not be what's happening.
Exactly.
So finally, Liesl, does the South African government have any duties towards school governing bodies?
Yes, the South African government does have a very important role to play in basic education, and if it's done correctly, everybody works together well, and that's the idea.
They cooperate.
Yes, you cooperate, and then everybody should be happy. So the state is obliged to recognize and respect that any power that it has in relation to the education of children is delegated to it by those children's parents, and it's delegated for the sole reason of enabling the state to support and enable parents to provide their children with basic education, because it's the parents' children, it's not the state's children. It's the parents' primary right and responsibility, not the state. So the state has limited power, but it is to enable the parents to fulfill their rights and obligations. The state should never overreach and abuse this power that is simply delegated to it. So the state has a duty to support and equip, not hinder, school governing bodies in the exercise of decision-making powers, and and to also help and support school governing bodies to effectively govern public schools. So in a nutshell, the state has a duty to support and enable parents to exercise their fundamental rights and to fulfill parents' obligation to provide their child with the kind and quality of basic education that they desire for the child. And this means that parents should not only be able to participate in the governance of the school, but also determine how the public school is governed in consultation with other partners in the basic education sector, of which the state is one. And this is the essence of a healthy, cooperative governance at grassroots democracy level.
I mean, this has just been such an enlightening discussion, because a lot of what you've said there, I think, goes directly contrary to what most parents, most of us would think, which is, oh, it's still state school, I don't have that much of a say. The state takes responsibility for all of this. And I know there's a school governing body, but I'm very busy. I'm working. I also have to, be mother, be father for the child at home when I get home, all of that. But from what you've said now, it's actually like I can't afford not to be involved, because as a parent, I get to have a say in all of these things where I normally find myself at loggerheads with the state. So I actually have a say in this. I have a responsibility to use it. And also what you were saying, which just struck me, is often one hears this term in loco parentis bandied around in videos and in interviews and stuff. And what that basically means is like the school is not the parent of the child, but the parent has delegated some of their parental authority to the school for the time that the child is at school. And from what you've just said, it's again that thing of the state is not my child's parent. I am my child's parent, and the state needs to not overstep its boundaries.
Exactly.
Liesl, thank you so much for today's discussion on school governing bodies. Listeners, viewers, we hope you find this weekly discussion enlightening. We hope that those of you that are parents, that you decide to run for next year's school governing bodies elections. And yes, until next time.
Good day. This is Daniela Ellerbeck, the Legal Advisor to Freedom of Religion South Africa. Remember to like and share this video, and then click on the subscribe button to make sure you never miss our video updates on vital religious freedom issues.